Welcome to the new sound of online radio. Welcome to the sound of Universal Broadcasting Network. 'Cause you make me feel like I've been locked out of hell. A mix of today's hits and hard-to-find favorites, combined with the most entertaining and intriguing talk anywhere. This is your sound. This is the sound of Universal Broadcasting Network at uenradio.com.
Hello, hello, Rebel Hearts community. This is Kristie Reeves, your host, and welcome to another inspiring show. We have so much incredible information for you today, and I'm really excited to introduce today's guest to you. But before we do that, let me give a shout out to one of our sponsors. As you know, we recently had our swag bag giveaway, and this company is just incredible, and I reached out to them to be part of our giveaway, and they said yes and donated their products. And I've been using their products actually for quite some time, and I love it. So let me tell you a little bit about them. The company's name is Sun Warrior. Sun Warrior is committed to making the best plant-based proteins and superfood supplements. Their mission is to illuminate body, mind, and planet, and it drives everything they do, from sourcing the finest organic ingredients across the globe to recyclable packaging. Delicious, healthy, and eco-friendly, it's simply who they are. Try one of Sun Warrior's organic plant-based proteins today and get 15% off plus free shipping. Go to sunwarrior.com and use the promo code WarriorSave for your discount. And I actually just had one of their shakes before I came here, and I love their products. So check them out at sunwarrior.com. So let me tell you a little bit about today's guest. His name is Mark Lakeman, and he's a Portland-based design activist. He's a co-founder of the nonprofit placemaking organization, the City Repair Project, and lead designer of the public interest architecture and planning firm Communitecture. Mr. Lakeman is also a co-founder and lead instructor at the Planet Repair Institute. Every design project he's involved with furthers the development of a beneficial vision for human and ecological communities, and his leadership has benefited communities across the North American continent. With City Repair, Mark was awarded the National Lewis Mumford Award by the international organization Architects and Planners for Social Responsibility for his work with Dignity Village, one of the United States' first self-developed permanent communities by and for previously homeless people. And we're going to talk a lot about his work that he's doing. I actually came across Mark's work a little bit more than a year ago. My dear friend Judy Julian asked me to go down to Venice Beach for an event about placemaking, and I actually had to say I had no idea what placemaking was about at that point. And I went to the event, and as Mark was talking, my jaw literally dropped. And I said, this is so incredible, and this needs to be shared with the world because of what he's creating in Oregon. I'm like, if we can bring it to the cities across the U.S. and even around the world, I think we can create amazing and incredible changes. And I'm so honored that he said yes to coming on today's show. So please help me to welcome Mark Lakeman. And Mark, can you hear us? Can you hear us? You should be able to
Yes, I can hear you now.
Perfect. Awesome. Welcome so much. I thank you so much for being on today's show, and I'm so excited to chat with you about all the things you have been doing in Oregon.
Thanks, Kristie. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really appreciate that you've made this time for us to talk.
Thank you so much. I actually want to start where it all started. We briefly started talking about it before the show. And my first question for you is, what is it that inspired the work that you're doing nowadays? What was the motivation behind you saying, I want to learn about these things and implement these things and go out into the world and do it?
Okay. I've got, I think, maybe 3 short answers, all that relate. One is that I'm very much a child of Portland. I grew up here in the foment of the 60s and 70s. And people were marching in the street and talking about sort of how all of these causes related. And of course, the free speech movement was also being born. So people were also wanting to just see what it would be like to actually be a less repressed culture and speak freely. And so I grew up in that. And in a very special place in a way, because Portland was determined to unmake itself and to take these new values and visions and embed them in physical changes. Like, for instance, almost every American city is missing gathering places and public squares. Portland decided that we would accommodate free speech by having a place to speak. You know, freedom of assembly requires a place to assemble kind of idea. So I grew up in a city that was determined to embed its change consciousness in the way that the urban environment would also be transformed, and the political culture would be transformed. We would have more grassroots leaders than ones that would just be ascending through the ladder of patriarchy. We would have a stronger infrastructure of neighborhood engagement, so that we would have a participatory culture at last, because it's not enough to just speak. If you really want to inhabit democracy, everybody has to be activated.
Yes.
So I was growing up in that, and my parents were both leaders in that movement. My father was actually hired as a young man out of a school on the East Coast to come to Portland and found the function of urban design in our city government. So basically, people said to him, "We don't have a plan. We don't have a vision. Where should we go?" So he was hired to kind of be politically expendable in case things didn't work out. But he was a very talented and aggressive, like very loving person, actually. And it mattered to him that we should at last have public spaces for community gathering. And he took on that cause. And part of what created me to take on the cause and sort of run with the torch was that his struggles became my bedtime stories. So his fight with the mayor, his fight with downtown business interests that didn't realize that this would actually benefit the whole city and revitalize our economy by creating attractive, urban nodes that would make, human beings want to come to human places, and therefore businesses would also thrive that were nearby. That was all very affecting. But I have to say, maybe the thing that's most interesting for anybody listening to this today is more of a mystical journey. After going into corporate architecture, and after 3 years running into a giant toxic waste cover-up in the architecture firm where I was working, I was so upset that I went traveling. And I literally went 7 years traveling.
Amazing.
Didn't have a whole lot of money, but I just would save and travel and then stop and make friends and make money and save and travel again. But I was going around the world asking Native societies, do you have any idea what is wrong with my community, with my society, with my people? And can you tell me what you can see about me? What is unhealthy about me? And wherever I went, people were so happy. They're like, my God, a white man is asking to be accountable.
Wow.
A white man wants to know what we see.
Wow.
Like, instead of just walking around with this like James Bond-like arrogance, that you can just sort of go anywhere and have anything and anyone that you want. Yeah, and that took me to some very, edges, but also to the edge of myself. And when I came back, I had been changed by those villages, and now I'm much more like a villager than an individuated, self-interested, self-absorbed white man that I was trained to be by my society. So that's a short answer, but there's a lot more to it. It involves Mayan people. That's always fun. It's always very interesting and challenging to our senses. Lots of indigenous people, Islamic context, Eastern and Western societies, things like that. So that's a bit of the answer.
That's amazing. I love that journey. And I love, how you turn that pain into something incredible, going on that search and finding solutions and actually bringing it back and creating change over here in the U.S. Now, when was actually the city repair project started? Was it started when you came back, or was it at a later point?
Well, it was officially started in 1996. It became a nonprofit in the year 2000.
Okay.
But the activism that really led up to it, like the struggle downtown to create our public square, to stop a parking garage from being built and to create a public square, that started, back in the 60s and 70s. And so really our placemaking cause has its roots in our ancestors' work. So I like to just credit that, because it didn't just start all at once.
Yeah.
But what we call city repair really began in the mid-90s.
In the mid-90s. And you talked about something so super that I thought that was so super interesting in your talk, where you spoke about how in the U.S. everything is built in squares. We build our blocks in squares. And then in Europe, everything is kind of meandering. And I'm from Germany, so I traveled around Europe. I grew up in Germany. So there, we have squares here and then, but we have the marketplaces. We have places where people meet. We have festivals in the community, in the small towns, and in the big towns as well. So can you elaborate a little bit more about what you found out about those two different kinds of structures?
Thank you for asking this most brilliant question, because there's a big difference between where you came from, which is the prevalent kind of urban form of the world. It's called a geomorphic village. Mm-hmm. It means basically that Germans, like Africans or Greeks or Spaniards, the people who live in a place have created their own environment. Mm-hmm. Basically, you've created your environment like a snail creates its own shell so that it fits you perfectly. And it's very, very different than how Americans live. We live in environments that aren't necessarily created by ourselves. For instance, we all get up in the morning, and without even knowing it, we leave the home zone to go to the work zone. We get in a car to transit the landscape, to go elsewhere, away from where, you might say that the neighborhood where you live, you could say that those are your people. In Germany, you would say that those are your people because you live and work with the same people. But in America, there's been a formulation, especially since the advent of the car, based on zoning laws that breaks down the family and separates basically the mother and the child traditionally from the father, who always must leave. And then, what you experience, of course, is a designed generation gap and a fracturing of the family. But the most fundamental problem is you're breaking down living and working. And that breaks the village apart, so that you really don't come to get to know the people you work with. Maybe you don't even come to get to care about them. And back at the family and in the neighborhood where everyone else is returning to their families without work, common work, to go shoulder to shoulder with each other to create a change, a beneficial effect for the community. At the end of the day, there is no change because your work has always been elsewhere. So in America, because of capitalism, people argue back and forth about this, but once people actually get an understanding of this, they won't be able to stand it anymore. Like, we're so reduced compared to a traditional landscape like you referred to, that at the end of the day, all we have is money. All the other forms of capital don't accumulate for us. At the end of the day, in a traditional village, the streets are safer, families are more interconnected, children are more integrated into their society, and they've learned all these lessons because their parents and their community are their true mentors, not for us. No, we go off to earn representational currency in order to pay for our lives. But at the end of the day, our neighborhoods have not become safer, and we might not have driven a single nail in the place where we live. So we haven't done anything for ourselves. And that means the world we're creating is really just a commodity. It doesn't become symbolic of ourselves. It doesn't become symbolic of our combined power. And it really is antithetical to democracy. I would say this kind of discussion proves that capitalism reduces our lives, and we might think we're the richest nation in the world. But in terms of the quality of our lives, the fact that our crime rates are 10 times higher than comparable nations, the absence of gathering places, the intense social isolation, we actually get way less for our dollar at the end of the day than other people that we think we have more than.
Yeah, I love what you just said. And for me, I've been in Los Angeles this is my 17th year. And I live in a townhome community, and I think I know 2 of my neighbors. And my family still lives in the 800 people village where I was raised in Germany, and I go back there a couple of times a year. And it's such a gift to go back, because I think whenever I go back, the whole village knows I'm back. And there is such a sweetness to that, where everybody has their garden, and many people grow their own vegetables or fruit, and neighbors exchange. And it's such a safe community for the children to grow up. And I know you've been doing some work on that with Portland, bringing the neighborhoods together in order to even create more safety for the children. And I remember when I was a little girl, I was riding my bicycle, and you can still do that. My parents would let me ride my bicycle all over town because they knew I would be safe. And I fell off my bicycle when I was 4 or 5 years old. But because the neighbors knew me, they carried me home to my mom and dad's house and took my bike. So my parents never had to worry about my safety when I was growing up there. And what a beautiful thing to have, where the kids can just go off and play and enjoy because of the level of protection and safety, because the communities know each other. So share with us some of the things you started doing. I remember you started talking about, or you were talking about the people coming together and creating artwork on the intersections of the street.
Yes. Okay. Well, I just got to respond to something you said.
Okay.
What you just talked about is the very basis of what this society here in the USA is aspiring to. Like, we're like, yeah, in order to be resilient, we need to know people around us. That's just great. What a great idea. And I absolutely agree with that. But I think it's very motivating for Americans to realize that that's where our own ancestors come from. And that's the kind of thing that we save thousands of dollars and pay a ticket to fly across the ocean to go see. So it's not like an abstract concept. It's not like it's impossible. However, something's going on, as Noam Chomsky says, in this country that is extremely special. And I want to root where this comes from for a second, because it's the context that we're having to address in our activism. Basically, in 1785, the Continental Congress enacted the National Land Ordinance. It was the essential document which underlies the infrastructure politically, economically, geographically, and in many other respects that underlies the United States. The next documents to come after that are the ones that we learn about in school, which of course are the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, other associated documents. But the National Land Ordinance is really the framework that those things fit into, and we are not taught about the National Land Ordinance. In fact, we're taught quite the opposite. In high school, we're taught that there's this Jeffersonian grid. So if you're in Los Angeles or Chicago or St. Louis or Seattle or anywhere else where the grid was imposed, which is basically everywhere, you're taught that, oh, it's a great thing. In fact, you might even read in your high school textbook how democratic the grid is, because after all, Thomas Jefferson was the one who brought it to us. No, what happened was the Spanish were using it in order to conquer and quell the native people, south of our border. And the Spanish had been using the same device for hundreds of years. And it was based upon, as far as they knew, Roman colonialism, a framework for basically, erasing native patterns, because you can't have lots of gathering places and participatory community if you're going to be an empire. So they erased those things and then cast a new order over it based on long, straight, flat lines that are incredibly boring, in order to reduce the land of what would become the United States and Canada. And if you really want to look at the whole big picture, all of the Western Hemisphere was reduced to a commodity. And it was predicated on the idea that indigenous people would not have political rights of political participation or rights of land ownership. And then the new invading colonizers would basically set up a whole new system based on the commodification of everything, based on the idea, the grossly offensive idea, that nothing in the world is sacred. The time, space, life, people, ourselves, would all become essentially reduced to an interchangeable commodity. And excuse me, but that's fucked up to such an extreme level that it really underlies, I think, almost all of the challenges we face as a society. And the way that you can see it is you can walk outside your door if you're in Los Angeles or Chicago and look at and just go, by God, everything is long and straight and flat. You can look further and see how the distinctions between what is private and public are enforced, or how everyone's interests are enforced by lines and embedded by insurance programs and local ordinances in order to affect an individuation of all of us from each other. Okay, but this is the biggest way you see it. This is what a Mayan man said to me as I was crying. I was apologizing for the invasion of their lands, and this person said, "No, you guys cannot actually take this upon yourselves. As accountable as you want to be, this is a global story. We are all in it together, and ultimately, you have to understand that we're all on the same side. When you get home, stand in a street intersection and notice that as far as you can see, to the left and the right in all directions, everything has been flattened and straightened. Walk a block away, see that it's the same. Go to another city and see that it's the same. and then learn the story of how those lines were embedded, and then most importantly for your own soul, when did the story of your people come into contact with those lines? And of course, I'm Celtic. You probably have Celtic roots. For both of us, it was the invasion of the empire into our lands, and the destruction of our gathering places, and the outlawing of our languages. And and now, at least in the USA especially, we live in neighborhoods of thousands and thousands of people without a single place to sit. We're told that we have no power where we live. We have to write a letter to a congressman or to a city council person, but we have no power to even slow traffic in our neighborhood. Which, just to summarize this rant of mine, nobody, no mother of any child in this country ever signed up for that kind of disempowerment, not only of themselves, but of our families into the future. So we're in a gigantic design. And it's time that people came to grips with it and saw it before their very eyes, because it's right outside your door.
Thank you for saying that. Oh my gosh, thank you. Yeah.
But you were wanting to talk about creative things, because I don't want to just be complaining about the problems. Fortunately, the solutions are everywhere.
Absolutely. But I think we needed to address and say, okay, this is where we're at right now. So what can we do? Let's get the calibration going. This is where we're at. How can we create the changes? How can we implement, getting out of these structures and creating new structures that are inclusive, that are respecting the individual in their own expression? What can we do, Mark?
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's tons and tons of things. We don't even have enough time to say all of them. And these aren't even abstract ideas. I mean, in Portland, Oregon, for instance, we've literally legalized the transformation of every street intersection in every residential zone all across the city for free. Every street intersection can be turned into a community gathering place for free. Amazing. And all of the streets that connect all those intersections, and I'm talking about literally thousands of intersections. I think it's 18,000 intersections can become public squares, and something like 5,000 street miles that connect those intersections can be now repurposed. I mean, if we want to, we can literally paint the surface of all of that infrastructure. We can also install interactive features, which includes benches, solar-powered kiosks, little free libraries, all these sort of small gestures that you could just get kids outside to do in an afternoon. Yeah, that kind of thing, such as you're showing on the screen. All of that is legal and free to do. The only condition is that there's a congressional delegation right there visiting that intersection, coming to Portland, all of these political leaders saying, oh my gosh, we can bring this back to our towns. Maybe the story of the United States of America being a democracy can turn the page to a new chapter.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. You can basically take, and this is 60 other cities have already done this. Take what Portland has done, the precedents we've set that basically go from, the mentality that you have no power to the mentality that you have all your power. And then this thing, if basically these ordinances facilitate your creative expression so that you can actually, what's required here legally, you're required to reach out to your neighbors within 2 blocks and invite them to a potluck. By God, you must have a potluck. And, you must listen to each other. I mean, this is so huge for an American to actually speak and listen to others around them. They say that, we can't listen for more than 15 seconds without being distracted. And so this gives you some practice in personal recovery. For every one of the listeners who are interested in yoga and meditation, I love all of that, but try this out too. Grow your sense of self to a larger scale. Start to rub up against the people around you and practice the auto osmosis that happens in village culture, and just see what happens then. And that's what we're talking about here. The painting of the street, the building of these features that happen in the right of way. Yes, it's about repurposing the right of way, so it's no longer the idea that you have no power, that you do, but it's fundamentally not the thing that you're making. It's the practicing of your power to get up and walk off the couch, to hit your stride, know what it's like to feel your power joining with others around you. And then next year you can even change the color of the painting. You can take things out, you can put new things back in. The things aren't what count. It's the fact that we're learning together and we're experimenting and by God, making mistakes, which is a very important thing to do on the way to perfection, which is somewhere out there for us, I suppose. So that's one answer. You can do the work of, just I'll send an entire thick document to anybody who asks by email.
Yeah.
All these legal innovations that can liberate your public space too. But I think the best answer to your question about what to do next, it might be like something you can dream, like to sit quietly and just give yourself 5 minutes to imagine what it was like for the people that you're connected to back through your genetic tree, through all of the millennia of your existence, because they're all still inside of you.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to just imagine. You can just sit there and silently listen to them. What was it like to live in a village, especially during the Neolithic period of 1,500 years that, according to excavations that we have access to, all of this extensive evidence, for extended periods of time where we can't find weaponry or fortifications. Spend some time imagining what it was like to live in a society that was apparently free of anxiety, characterized by cultural development and exuberant celebration, and a sense that the divine was integral with the earth itself. And there was no imagining of a punitive destiny, like that somehow you would be punished for not obeying the patriarchy. Spend some time imagining what it was like to walk streets, where your little girl or your little boy, you can let them run out of your sight and not be afraid that they'll end up on a milk carton. Like, you could look at anything in our reality and imagine the inverse, because that's what people used to experience when they had power of place. Think about that and let your heart ache, and even let yourself become angry, but come back to your present self, to your rootedness, and ask yourself, where at last will I have my village? Will I be my village? Because at some point, the ultimate revolution, I would say, after these 2 decades of wildly successful activism, the ultimate revolution is to choose your village. Like, even if nobody else around you knows what you're talking about, like, by God, my taproot goes down right here, and this becomes my sacred village. Like, to say that, apparently nothing in the world is mundane. The whole time it was all sacred. I've been tricked. And so has everyone else around me. And start to, I refuse to be selfish. I refuse to be, an individuated, patterned consumer anymore. I will be a sacred earthling, or however you define yourself, and then start to give more than you take, and start to reach out and support more than you control. Just invert your present behavior and liberate your soul and liberate your behavior. I could go on, obviously, for a long time.
Thank you. That's brilliant. I remember one of the things you were sharing about was how you created community gardens, or even turned sidewalks into community gardens, getting the neighbors together, everybody pitching in a few dollars, and then starting to actually change the landscape of Portland. Can you tell us a little bit more about how and what you were doing over there?
Well, part of it was that we were advised, like I was saying about asking people what to do. Everybody wanted to talk about colonialism. And so part of it was having an idea of what to do and being coached by Native people. They're like, okay, this is so great. We've been attacked by you. We can tell you how we used to live, but the best thing is to tell you how you used to live. You used to be in a place like this. So in a way, you already know what to do. It's hardwired inside of you. It's only been the last few, maybe centuries, maybe decades, that you've been so profoundly confused, but you know what to do. Just, frankly, I would say go Jedi. Like, trust your feelings. Trust your feelings. You know what to do. Of course, if you're afraid, you feel like you don't know what to do. But here's something. According to this group, littlefreelibrary.org, that's been building all these little libraries, they came to our first intersection project in 1996. They saw all of these little installations on the corners that we had built as a little village, as a retroactive village, and they were inspired to start creating libraries, because we had built this one on the corner, that one, and it was those kids right there that built it. They were 2 neglected foster kids. I can tell you, I was involved in that library, and I remember I couldn't stand it anymore. I just looked around and having I came back to where I'd lived my whole life, where I wasn't interested in talking to people. After 7 years of just being opened up by one village after another, this is the weirdest thing as a white man walking around asking those questions. Nobody ever said to me, I want to kill you. Nobody ever did. They were like, we are part of a greater family.
Wow.
I mean, I'm almost crying now just to think about the level of empathy and brotherhood and sisterhood that was extended to me. So when I got back to my neighborhood, I couldn't stand it anymore. I looked around at the people that I had learned not to care about, and I just walked right up to their door and I was like, do you need any help? This woman says to me, Anne Marie, she's this elder Catholic woman, she's like, you've never spoken to me in all the years you've lived here. What's changed? You know, so I told her about my travels, and she said, well, okay, there's a lot of help that I need, but why don't we do something more outward for everybody? So we built this 24-hour solar-powered self-service tea station, we called it.
Wow.
And she said she would take care of the cups and keep the water hot. And, you know, to this day, it's out there serving tea, and all these neighbors are helping.
Wow.
On another corner, then she and I walked up and knocked on Brian's door, and we said, Brian, we're kind of done just living separately. I know this sounds ridiculous because he was a dragster mechanic and he never liked to talk to anybody either.
Wow.
But he said, you know what? We've got all these books in my house that we never use. We could make a little library on this corner or something and just give away books. Basically, there were already all these ideas. I mean, oh, this is the coolest thing.
Okay.
This is the coolest thing. Everyone who's listening to this, everyone in the freaking grid all across the United States, if you can just look around you, like, okay, start off with what you feel, that you feel that you're separate and alone. Like everybody feels that way. Oh, nobody understands. I'm alone. Nobody understands. Look around and realize everybody's feeling alone. And they all think nobody else understands. Like we have so much in common. We even share how we feel about isolation. That's cool.
Yeah.
But look around and realize you are surrounded by the muscle and the talent that powers this entire society. Like in every neighborhood, oh yeah, there are disenfranchised children. There are people that are gaining weight because they're basically attached to technology now and they're not using their bodies. They're not doing things. Oh yeah, there are people who know how to build. There are people who know how to cook, who know how to look after children, who have political ideas. The entire village is resident in every single neighborhood where people think they have no power and they don't speak. All the power is right around you. If there's one thing we've been taught in our isolation is to not ask for help, to think that we have to be an island and to be better than others or to know everything already.
To be self-sufficient and independent.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think realize that that's a bit of brainwashing and some conditioning right there.
Yeah.
And look around and just go, oh my God, everyone who I thought might be a butthead or who doesn't care about me is in the same boat.
Yeah.
And if we just come to each other, I mean, stop waiting for a brownout, you know, or some catastrophe to actually speak to each other. Here's my favorite thing. This woman in Seattle, her strategy was to bake hundreds of chocolate chip cookies and go around the neighborhood at night while everyone was sleeping, get these little paper plates, put cookies on them, make a little note and say, hi, you live in my neighborhood. I live in this neighborhood. I'll bet you're awesome. Here's my name and number in case you ever need any help. And that's how she got started. She was just like, fine, I refuse to be selfish. Have some cookies.
Wow. That's amazing. That's an easy thing to do, to distribute cookies. I love that.
Rather than thinking you have to get a bunch of consent or fundraise a bunch of money, you can just use some flour and some chocolate chips.
Yeah.
To get started.
That's absolutely amazing. And from what I know, you, through the work you're doing and bringing communities together, you eradicated the homeless situation in Portland. Is that right?
Well, we've made an enormous impact
decreased
on it.
Yeah.
It's not entirely eradicated, but after I answer your question, I think you'll be pretty shocked.
Okay.
So what's happened is we started with a project in 1999 that became Dignity Village. It was a tiny home-based village that's run by and for the people who live there. But the city council didn't automatically just say yes to this idea because they were used to sweeping all these homeless camps. But it's a longer story, but basically the city council ended up saying, okay, let's try this out. Let's see if this, like, because we made a proposal, and basically if anybody organizes and makes a proposal to their city government, it's a powerful thing. Like, somebody's made this 8.5 by 11 document that organizes their ideas and makes a bunch of, identifies some goals and to identify a strategy. Gosh, I mean, that's like what every developer does. It's hard to not pay attention to that. So we did that with Dignity Village.
Yeah.
And it turned out, the police surveyed and they said, my God, this is the safest geography in the city. Like, these homeless people, with whatever problems they had going in, are now taking care of each other to the extent that the crime has dropped to the lowest extent, and not just of that place, but for blocks around.
Wow.
What's going on here? And then it turns out the cost of running the village is $3 a night per person, which is more than 25 times less than actually it would be closer to 30 times less than what it costs people in Los Angeles to support people through taxes in government shelters that don't do nearly as good a job. Other things too, like the village is totally walkable, talkable, car-free, and has the lowest carbon footprint of every community in the city, and also the highest rate of voting participation of all communities in the city, of all.
Wow.
So that's amazing. But yet the city council remains cynical, like, gosh, there must be troublemakers living there. Eventually they'll make some trouble, even if they are the safest place in the city. Something will have to go wrong. Well, the homeless problem kept getting worse, and we were only housing about 70 people in this village. So suddenly there was another initiative a few years later that became known as R2D2, which is known as Right to Dream 2. It's the idea of a rest stop where these saints, I mean, basically they're like shaman almost, homeless people that are shaman. Basically 15 or 20 of them are taking care of about 80 other ones a night, just giving them shelter for the night, and they're running it out of whatever they can make. But their job in this world is to take care of other people who are even weaker than them. And then another village emerged, and then another village, and finally the city council was so used to the idea that it wasn't just ordinary citizens in a house that could have a good idea, but basically everyone in the city could have a good idea. And that let's quote Ronald Reagan for a second. If we're trying to persuade conservatives, let's encourage people to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. This is the ultimate example of that, even if they have to build out of what they find in a dumpster to do it. So the mayor and the city council were all on first name basis with homeless leadership. This actually motivated the mayor 2.5 years ago to say, all right, as of tonight, we have an emergency. Like, let's not just wait for an earthquake for all the housed white people to be threatened, to call it an emergency. We've got thousands of people. We've got women who are raped in the streets, sometimes more than 3 times a night.
Wow.
Out in the streets of every city in this country. That's an emergency. So the mayor finally somehow cared enough out of his corporate cocoon to say, as of now, we have an emergency, and I am empowered as mayor to say that within 1 month, every woman will be off the street. Every veteran will be off the street. So we actually accomplished that. There came a day, it was 2 Decembers ago, when the mayor declared every single homeless woman and veteran is accounted for. We still have lots of homeless men, and we're working on it, but he started to open up all of these shelters, some of them temporary, some of them permanent. But gosh, I mean, at this point, the tiny home model of it, I don't really want to call it that. It's the tiny village. It's like, it's the village made by and for people. You might have a drawing of the new version of R2D2 that I sent, in case you can find that site plan. And there's also a street level view. Okay. Architects are coming to the rescue now. People are getting involved to help. The society's scared of what these things look like. Okay, fine, everyone's safe, but it looks bad.
Yeah.
They can't complain about that anymore. We've got R2D2 looking like a modernist wonder.
Wow.
We've got the Kenton Women's Village, designed by 14 architecture firms collaborating.
Wow.
Now we've got a village entirely by and for veterans going up in Oregon City. And San Jose, California is coming to the rescue of their homeless population with 10 at once.
Wow.
So this is happening all over the place, and the model is really proving itself.
And
So
sorry,
go ahead.
And didn't you implement like facilities where the people who were living in these villages could get an online degree. There were like computer facilities, and they could go online and learn and study and that for eventually find a profession, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
That began at Dignity Village with a solar-powered office and solar-powered computer systems. Believe it or not, you know, I mean, Portland has the culture of talent and skills, and also, you know, excess resource to bring that kind of stuff to the village and set it up as a prototype, as a model. I just want to say, you know, I design co-housing and I design villages, but there's no developer and there's no housed community with the wealth that actually has, in my experience, has ever created as complete a program of spaces and amenities as a homeless village will create. When people ask me, like, what are you getting out of this? I'm like, I mean, I didn't really intend it this way, but I'm now one of the most, you know, qualified village designers in the world, because like I've designed villages where nothing is missing. That's me sleeping on the floor next to a model that my father built back in the 70s to chart the course of Portland. That's funny. You have that image. How interesting. Yeah, I used to take a nap under that when I was a child.
Wow.
And a friend of mine had me lay down next to it just to take a picture 40 years later.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, Mark, what are some of the biggest changes you have seen over the last 20 years since you started City Repair Project in Portland?
Okay. Well, I mean, the most popular answer is massive infrastructure change. I mean, a massive, you might say it's a liberalization, but I think it's a liberation. I really want to say it that way. It's a liberation, civic government of the business culture, propelled by the fact that those entities, those cultures realized, oh my God, we live in Portland too. We are the community. Like this terrible, like Wizard of Oz curtain between the power structure and the people turned out to be flimsy, and the community was saying, well, wait, now we are the city after all. And the city was saying, well, gosh, we are the community. I think the breaking of that perceived barrier is probably the biggest change. You know, I would say, you know, to measure it, we could say, you know, Portland is a city that has actually, in all of North America, the only city to actually meet and exceed the carbon reduction targets that we agreed to in Kyoto.
Wow.
That's big.
That's huge. That's really huge.
We have the most bike lane miles and the most bike commuters by far.
Wow.
Everyone is driving. We've actually measured that people individually are driving less and less every year as we build more and more alternative infrastructure. Our local government is increasingly occupied by women in positions of power.
Wow.
And that's, you know,
That's
fantastic.
huge. Yeah.
Also, we've become a culture that's courageous enough to look at our own problems and dig deeper into the ones that we weren't even thinking about, or, you know, like where white people are ignoring the challenges that people of color face every year. And now we're at last looking in the mirror. So there's all that. But I think the biggest change is consciousness. People have gone from thinking that they have to wait around for someone else to do something for them to realize that they will find their own fulfillment and their own, you know, their own abating of anxiety and the growing of their power of self by actually engaging in their own reality. And I think becoming a villager again. I think that's the answer, really.
Yeah, yeah. That's incredible. And it's so interesting that you're saying that, because I believe we live in what we call the Messianic age at the moment. We're, instead of waiting for someone to save us, we are the ones we've been waiting for. We become our own Messiah. We're becoming the ones who are realizing about our own power and the power we have to create change, to really move things. And it feels like that's exactly what you've been doing for the past 20 years. So I'm so blown away by everything that you've been sharing with us today.
Thank you for saying that, because I absolutely agree. I mean, we're even getting to redefine this notion of Messiah. I mean, to go back into the roots of it, you know, it's a militaristic association that's very culturally specific. And if the rest of us are valid cultures as well, like, who's going to save us?
Yeah.
Are we going to wait around for someone who's more, you know, interested in a universal solution? Or are we going to actually, you know, see what we're made of? personally, I want to see what I'm made of. I want to
Yes.
know how fast I can run and how much I can lift. And I want to, you know, for me, that has entailed learning how to enjoy supporting the unfolding of other people's power. I have found that I become far more powerful by supporting the empowerment of other people. And I think that that's an effect that's like what you're talking about. And it's something that we can all add to and all claim.
That is beautiful. That is absolutely beautiful. Now, before we wrap up over here, I'm just looking at the time. You're teaching workshops on this. You're teaching classes on that. So let's say our audience members are now going, I love what you talked about in the show. I want to learn more about it. I want to start implementing some of these things in my community. What is the best way to go about it? Is it the best to get in touch with you? Take one of your workshops. Tell us a little bit more about how people can learn these things.
Okay. Well, let's see. You can go to a number of different websites. One is cityrepair.org. And at that website, you can probably see information on our 10-day placemaking festival. It's basically the most sort of large-scale, intensive urban permaculture festival in the world, where we build 40 projects all across the city at the same time in 40 different communities. And then at night, people, and part of that is that there's a school that happens during the morning period for people who want to be leaders in their own communities and take these ideas back. And then at night, there's a one central village that everyone comes to dance and sing and eat together and learn together and share ideas. Very much embodied learning, actually, not just sort of passive learning. So that's a huge project called the Village Building Convergence. You can also go to villagebuildingconvergence.com to find out more about what we just accomplished. But lots of transforming of streets into public spaces, and lots of building of ecological prototypes and permaculture and political projects in all the different realms of the city, with the city government involved in helping to fund.
That's
part of it. Another would be communitecture.net, where you can go see our architecture projects. We're about to do a climate adaptation project around the perimeter of the Bay Area that engages communities to stand up together to fight climate change and also to prepare to adapt to it as well. So this is a great place to go to learn more about that.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So please, everybody, get in touch with Mark and see what you can do in your own communities. Mark, is there a final wrap-up message you have for us before we finish over here?
Well, I would encourage everyone to enact, just like a stream flows into a larger tributary that flows eventually into a river and then joins the ocean and then returns to the land as part of the hydrological cycle. You can be like a stream. You can make your life into a pathway that flows together with the lives of other people, and join your own notion of the revolution together in a common course where everyone's interests, ultimately become intertwined. Well, whatever metaphor you want to choose, the revolution can happen on your terms, but you'll find that everyone else wants you to succeed, and that you have everything in common with other people in terms of how you would define that revolution and how you would define your success. So I would say this. I was told by a Mayan friend of mine, Chanquin Viejo, he said, the revolution you seek is one where you have to be able to start with whoever you are right now, wherever you are, with whoever you're among, with whatever you have. But right now, as you are, you must be able to start with. So whatever that means to you is perfect. That's what I would say.
Amazing. What a beautiful closing note. Thank you so much for all the information and for the inspiration. Thank you for everything that you are doing and have been doing and will be doing in creating these amazing new communities. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you, Katie.
And Rebel Hearts, I hope you are inspired, and we've got a whole bunch of information for you today. And I wish you an absolutely amazing, wonderful week, and we'll see you next Wednesday at 3 p.m. And remember to rebel on.
In the future, talk radio will actually educate, inspire, and make you think. The future is now. Topics and music that affect your life from Universal Broadcasting Network. Tune in at ubnradio.com.